Welcome back, everyone, to the Tampa Bay Rays and New York Mets Moneyball Reimagined Dual Dynasty. I'm here with a recap of April, just kind of assessing where the teams are at, looking at our results, and then also taking a look at some player stats and just kind of around the league stats, standings, those kinds of things. Both teams check in with a record of 16 and 13, and both kind of followed similar paths so far this year. Both starting pretty hot. Tampa, we lost two of our first three, but then reeled off seven in a row. And we're really sitting in a pretty good spot until the end of April kind of knocked us down a peg. Apparently, the White Sox are some kind of juggernaut when they play us. They're not very good, but, 10 and 19 record, and let's see, five of their wins are against us. So 5-game losing streak towards the end of April mercifully was snapped in the final game against the White Sox. But really, if you just look at the scores, the pitching, particularly the bullpen, has kind of been a letdown. Plenty of games where we gave up a handful of runs, 7 runs against Detroit, 10 runs against Boston, 13 runs against the White Sox, 8 runs against Houston. This game in particular was brutal. We were up 5-2 in the bottom of the ninth. And Liam Hendricks, who is a fantastic story in real life, but has been kind of a disaster out of our bullpen so far. He allowed all 4 runs to score. ERA sitting right around 10, and he's thrown almost 9 innings worth. So Hendricks has struggled a lot. If we look at the stats for Tampa Bay, I'll just sort by average. So Manuel Margot has been a really pleasant surprise. He was one of the guys I considered trading right off the bat just because his contract is not the greatest. Even with this spend more money than anyone else strategy, still wasn't sure if he had a spot on our roster, but he's been great. 3 homers, a 304 average. He is an outstanding center fielder, as you can see, fielding of 87. Speed isn't bad. He's stolen 5 bags. So he's been good. Wander Franco's been all right. Decent amount of homers. Average is okay. Arenado's been pretty good. You see Chris Bryant with 8 homers. So he's near the top of the leaderboards in the American League for that. So all in all, not too shabby. But we do have 4 guys who essentially start between Arozarena, Happ, Lau, and Perez, who have all been pretty miserable. Arozarena's hitting 220, only 3 homers. Ian Happ, I'm really surprised to see him hitting this poorly because I feel like I generally hit well with Ian Happ, and that could just be kind of a misremembering and recency bias kind of thing because I homered in one of my last games with him, but he's been atrocious. Lau has been absolutely awful, 176. And Perez, same deal. 3 homers for him and Lau, but 140. And it's weird because, I guess Lau doesn't have the greatest contact numbers, but Happ's are pretty good and Perez's are pretty good. So hopefully those will turn around as time goes on. It's not like anyone else has totally overachieved. Margot is probably not going to hit 300 all year. But the lineup has been, a fair amount of guys doing about as one would expect. Bryant hitting 8 homers in April is probably an overachievement. I don't think he's going to hit 50 homers or anything this year. But the bottom half of this roster chart here is pretty brutal. So hopefully some of these guys will get going. I'm certainly in a position to make trades and wheel and deal with the Rays, but also I'm not trying to make trades that would be horribly unrealistic. And also with Lau and Arozarena, for this whole first season, I do have to keep at least 13 original Rays on the roster. We're at 14 right now, so I could spare one of them, but I don't really want to trade either of them. They're both pretty good young players, and Happ in particular is very versatile, so hopefully they'll get going. If we look at the pitchers, starters have been largely good. Marcus Stroman's been really on his game, 245 ERA. Same with Luis Castillo. Eflin's been okay. you'd hope for a little bit better than a 4 ERA after he just got the biggest contract ever handed out in Tampa Bay Rays free agency history. But not terrible. DeGrom has been DeGrom and has stayed healthy, most importantly. Jeffrey Springs has had to start a couple games because, as we see, Tyler Glasnow is on the IL for, I think, like one more day. He got concussed, I assume, by taking a liner off the head in a simulated game. But he's been decent, too, in his couple of starts, 3.48 ERA. The bullpen has been where we've run into problems. Sean Armstrong has only pitched a couple of innings, and he actually came up as a result of Glasnow going on the IL because we had room for another pitcher. He's been sort of a nightmare in his limited work. Pete Fairbanks hasn't been great. 4.0 ERA is not that bad, but given that he's pitched 9 innings worth, and he's normally kind of a lockdown guy or seen as a lockdown guy, that's a problem. Liam Hendricks has been, as mentioned earlier, a complete disaster. He's thrown almost 9 innings, and his ERA is almost 9. So could certainly upgrade the bullpen. Hendricks was somebody we acquired from the White Sox. So that'll be something that it's usually a trade deadline kind of thing that teams look to add help to their bullpen, but maybe I'll look sooner, especially if we don't get off to a good start in May. So that's where the Rays are at. I'll look at the Mets, and then we'll take a look at the standings for all the different divisions and look at the league leaders and stuff. Mets, like I mentioned at the top, have the exact same record as the Rays, interestingly enough. And like I said, a similar path. Mets started pretty hot. Started out, 8-3. And then we're kind of treading water for a little while and ran into some trouble when we went out west. So we got swept by the Dodgers and then ended up splitting 4 games with the Giants, but lost 2 of the first 3. Just lost a 3-game set against the Nationals, which featured the most recent game on this channel that was basically a nightmare. I think I left like 10 men on base. It was actually, I think, more than that. It might have been 11 or 12. And had a disastrous 6th inning where we gave up 3 runs, so hasn't been the greatest. Ended the month decently, though, with a couple wins against the Braves before losing the most recent game 2-1. The story of the Mets has kind of been, if we win, we're usually winning by a decent amount, and if we lose, it's usually close. If we look at some of these wins, we got 11-6, 7-1, 8-0, 7-1, 12-2, 9-2, whereas a lot of the losses, 6-5, 6-4, 7-5, 3-2, 2-1. A lot of the losses have been close. So Tampa has just kind of been a teeter-totter in terms of play well, play poorly, play well, play poorly, whereas the Mets have been more so like generally winning by bigger margins and then losing the closer games. Stats for the Mets. Harold Castro in very limited ABs is hitting 350. Chas McCormick has been fantastic. I'm going to actually make sure he gets more playing time because he and Adolis Garcia have been platooning against righties. And McCormick just needs to play more. He's a great fielder. He's fast, but he's also hitting 317. And then another Astro, Jeremy Pena, has been great out of the leadoff spot. 302 with 5 homers. Can't ask for much more out of him. Then we have a couple random guys, Danny Mendick and Brett Beatty, both doing all right. And then kind of like with the Rays, we see a lot of middling averages. The Mets have been hitting for a good amount of power, as you can see. Among all of these players who play with regularity, pretty much everyone has at least 3 homers. Chas McCormick has 1, and Castro barely plays. Adolis Garcia, I don't know what he needs, if he needs an exorcism or needs some kind of rehabilitation trip down to single A like Alek Manoah got in real life recently. I don't know what Garcia needs. He's hitting almost 100. He homered on opening day, actually, and then he's hit 1 homer since, but basically nothing else. So he's really struggled. Alonso has gotten going a little bit recently. He is at least making up for it with some homers. I think he's second right now in the National League in homers at 7. And his on-base percentage isn't bad. He's been walking a good amount. So hopefully we'll get some of those guys going. But all in all, the lineup's been decent, not too shabby. And then if we look at the pitchers, not bad either. Tommy Henry's been pretty good. Bryce Miller's been pretty good. David Peterson's been pretty good. Interestingly enough, actually, of the 5 starters, the worst so far performance-wise has been Justin Steele, who's supposedly the ace. He's only rated an 86, so it's not like we expect him to win the Cy Young or anything. But he has struggled the most. And the bullpen's been decent. Felix Bautista in the back end's been all right. Joey Cantillo, he just got hurt, so he'll be out for a while, but he's been a decent long reliever. It's actually kind of bad luck for him to have a 1-4 record when he has a 2.32 ERA in 31 innings pitched. So we do have some guys who have kind of gotten shelled out of the bullpen. Sam Hentges in 5 2/3 innings, his ERA is 11, and Jeff Brigham, similar amount of innings, similar amount of runs allowed. So that's not the greatest. Dennis Santana I'll give a pass to because he's only pitched 1 inning. But all in all, the Mets are a lot less able to make any upgrades or trades just because my budget has to stay under Oakland's. And again, just like with Tampa, I do have wiggle room of I can get rid of, I think, one more of the original Mets if I wanted to and trade for somebody who's like a minimum salary. So I'll look to potentially do that as time goes on, but I'm going to kind of wait and see with them. If we look at the standings real quick, Mets are in first place. They've been in first place pretty much the whole year so far. Really, we've been lucky because the rest of the division has struggled. The Phillies started 0-10, so they've actually bounced back decently to get to the spot that they're in, but the Braves have not really performed that well. Nationals are middle of the pack, and then the Marlins have been one of the worst teams in the league. And really, that kind of, nobody really pulling away, nobody really being unbelievably disastrously bad, that idea kind of rings true for the rest of the league, too. You see the Brewers, they're in first, but the Reds are in last place, only 4.5 back. The Rockies, kind of the surprise team, leading the National League right now. But a bunch of teams clumped up there. San Diego's in 4th, and they would be tied for first in our division. And then similar thing in the American League. We are 1.5 games back of the Orioles, who were actually 17-9 at one point and have been playing really well, just like they are in real life. So this will probably be a competitive division all the way up through the end of the season. The Twins and Guardians both playing well in the early going here. So the Twins have the best record in the American League Central. The Rangers had the best record for most of April, but they've been slumping lately. They've lost 3 in a row. So that's where the divisions shake out. Certainly both teams are in a good spot to contend as we head into the summer. And then if we just look really quickly at the league leaders, Omar Narvaez, who I traded from the Mets to the Dodgers, is apparently turning into, second coming of Joe Mauer or something. He's hitting 361. And so I'll just go through these different categories somewhat quickly. Nothing too crazy, although I will say Kyle Schwarber leading the league in triples is actually crazy. And then some Rockies fueling there. Good start here. Benefiting from Coors Field, I'm sure. I feel like in the games that I've played, I've gotten a decent amount of opportunities to steal bases, but I want to increase that as we head deeper into the season, just because I do feel like I've got a good amount of speed, particularly on the Mets, and it is just a great opportunity to get more runners in scoring position and kind of move the carousel along. So that's what the National League is looking like in terms of all the different league leaders, and then I'll run through the same thing with the American League. Teoscar Hernandez was hitting over 400 for most of the early part of the season. Looks like he's cooled off to the tune of still hitting 370. And then Yordan Alvarez, just an absolute monster. He homered in the game that we played against the Astros, and it was one of those things that seemed like it was only a matter of time. So he's got 11 homers. Teoscar's got 12. Chris Bryant tied with Andrew Vaughn for third. So hopefully, as the season goes on, we'll start to see more Rays creeping into these top 10 lists. We certainly have the potential to see that. But as long as we're going to be a very hot and cold, mercurial, off and on bunch, then it's going to be tough to crack any of these categories. So, with all that being said, that's the April recap. I'll be back with some May gameplays soon, and we'll keep this train rolling. Thanks for watching as always. We'll see you again soon.